you're listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and please stay tuned until noon for the weather and GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. I am so glad to be here today. I'm sure you're probably wondering, wait, isn't it usually the news and the weather? Yeah, I can't do news today. We're having some technical difficulties on that front, and the the people in charge of that are having leg issues. So we will just be skipping over that because we don't have time to sort that out. We'll just talk about the weather, and then GameBabble Live, your video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. But we've still got a little bit of time before noon, so please enjoy No Good by Kaleo, and please stay tuned to 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave. Thank you so much for listening. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM, KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell. And normally we'd do the news and the weather right now, but our news is broken. So, the news is just broke. It fell apart. It's on the floor. It's in pieces. I don't know what to do about it. So, it's not literally on the floor. Don't, come rushing down here thinking I broke a computer or anything. It's fine. So, let's just skip straight to the weather because the weather still functions. And, so, today is partly cloudy, high of 89, low of 71. Tomorrow, it will still be partly cloudy, but it'll have a high of 91 and a low of 62. So, getting hot again, but then Friday, temperatures actually drop. We get a high of 77 and a low of 60, and it'll still be partly cloudy. That sounds great to me. That's a pretty nice temperature. Saturday, it'll be partly cloudy, mostly sunny, high of 82, low of 67, so the temperature goes back up. Sunday, high will still be 82, low of 67, but there will be scattered thunderstorms as we go into Monday, where it will be partly cloudy, high of 84, low of 64. So basically, I'm just seeing partly cloudy all day, every day, except Sunday, where we're going to get some rain, and yeah, temperatures in about the mid-80s. So, welcome to the start of August. Sounds Augusty to me. Unfortunately, that's all I can do on that one. So please, stay tuned for GameBabble Live. After this short break, we will have GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. We will get right to that after Deep Blue Dream by Ghost in the Machine. Please stay tuned and enjoy here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Thank you so much for listening. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Once again, I'm your host, Jell. Let's kick things off with our new releases for this week and what's coming out next week. So, PlayStation 4, it's actually been a surprisingly slow week. PlayStation 4, we got Aven Colony, Dementrios, The Big Cynical Adventure, Dino Frontier, which is actually a PlayStation VR, city building game. Unfortunately, it's a bit pricey. I would have completely pounced that, but I was like, a bit pricey, and I gotta pay for some things this month, so I'll go wait a little bit on getting Dino Frontiers. Then Draw Fighters, which, that just looked, I don't understand. Draw Fighters just looks like competitive turn-based combat. It's not a fighting game, and you don't draw anything. So I don't understand that game. It doesn't look bad, I just don't understand. Frisky Business, Patapon Remastered, so that's good. Shadow Tactics, Blades of the Shogun, The Long Dark, and then in 2 days we get Lawbreakers Collector's Edition. Let's see what Xbox One got. Xbox One got Aven Colony, Hunting Simulator, Shadow Tactics, Blades of the Shogun, and Slime Rancher, which you'd think I'd care more about. Along with Dementrios, The Big Cynical Adventure, and a game called Tacoma, which is this weird indie, you're in a spaceship game, inside of, like, a space colony. It's a weird, puzzly, adventure-y game. I haven't looked too hard into it, but I remember it being shown at a couple E3s. Also, Mr. Shifty, Race Arcade, and The Way. Moving right along to the Nintendo Switch, you can currently download Shovel Knight for Blaster Master Zero for free for a little bit, and then it's going to start costing money, but Shovel Knight is out for Blaster Master Zero, if you would like some Shovel Knight. Let's see, what else have we got? How about the 3DS? Also, hey, you can get Shovel Knight. Good times, good times. And on Vita, nothing. Nothing on Vita right now. We got things on Vita in 2 weeks. So, that takes care of things for this week. Hold on just a second. And let's see. So that takes care of things coming out this week. How about things coming out next week? Well, PlayStation 4, next week we are looking at the Sexy Brutale Full House Edition, along with Batman the Enemy Within Episode 1, The Enigma, which is another one of the Telltale game series, Black Hole Complete Edition, Graceful Explosion Machine, Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, which that actually surprised me. That's the new game from Ninja Theory, the people who made Heavenly Sword and the DMC Devil May Cry reboot thing, because that's, like, not being sold at full price, and I don't think is a box release. I didn't expect that. Lawbreakers apparently comes out again. Okay. Masquerada, Songs and Shadows, and Mega Man Legacy Collection 2. That's on PlayStation 4. Xbox One, what do you got next week? You've also got Batman the Enemy Within Episode 1, The Enigma, so Telltale Batman, some more. Black Hole Complete Edition, Masquerada, Songs and Shadows, Mega Man Legacy Collection 2. Alright. Switch, what have you got for us next week? Well, next week for the Nintendo Switch, we get Flip Wars and Ironcast. Oh, the week after next is when Sonic Mania comes out. Oh, that's surprising. So yeah, that's the Switch. 3DS, you got anything next week? No. And PlayStation Vita got anything next week? No. So that covers our games coming out this week, games coming out next week. Like I said, kind of slow. We finally found that summer drought. We'd been looking for it. There's supposed to be a summer game drought, and it strangely did not quite happen this week. So that was peculiar. As for anime in theaters, well, let me try to pull this up. Things have been a little disorganized. On the 11th, we have In This Corner of the World. On August 14th, 16th, and 19th, we have Fairy Tail Dragon Cry. And, let's see, other than that, there is, I believe it's like the 25th and 26th. I don't have it pulled up right now for a variety of reasons, but I know that we should be having Laputa, Castle in the Sky, coming to theaters, sometime soonish. I like, end of the month? I think that's 24th. I'm trying to pull it up as fast as I can. Give me a second. It's been a kind of disorganized day. And none of these links are being helpful to me. Criminy. Castle... Professionalism in the sky. Please work. Please type properly. Show times. That is still not... Cripes. So you could make your Ghibli Fest a little more easy to read. You know what? I'll tell you after the break when Laputa Castle in the Skies is. And also, there's like 2 other like artsy animated films coming from G-Kids soon-ish, and... good. I'll tell you after a break. Things are already falling apart over here. So next up, we've got Spectacular by St. Orleans here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Please stay tuned, and thank you so much for listening. And yeah, there will be more GameBabble soon. So yeah, stay tuned. Thank you for listening. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Joe, and this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. And that song was After School Special by Mesoterra. Anyway, like I was saying, Laputa Castle in the Sky will be in theaters August 27th and 28th. Along with all the stuff at the beginning of August. I'm terribly sorry, G-Kids has a terrible website. Like, seriously, it's like, oh, hey, we've got Studio Ghibli Fest 2017. Okay, what are the films? What are the times? Oh, you're not good at telling us these things. Now are you? And then they've got, like, a bunch of other, like, interesting animated films that'll be hitting theaters that, aren't Japanese, like Mune Guardian of the Moon, which, wow, is that not Japanese, if you know what Mune means in Japanese. But yes, Mune Guardian of the Moon is French in origin and will be in theaters for one day only. That's August 12th. And then I saw something about The Girl Without Hands. When is The Girl Without Hands going to be in theaters? Also French, and that will be... let's see, when will it be in theaters in Missouri? Does it even have a Missouri showtime? That's a good question. we might not be able to see that. Nearest one I see is in Chicago, Illinois. Have to research that a little bit more. But yeah, that's another film. Anyway, I'm sorry, the station is falling apart slightly. Yeah, generally doing okay. So let's talk about video game news, which is, of course, kind of slow today. Not a lot of things came out, but there's still some interesting stuff going on, like apparently a hardcore Pokemon Go player is suing Niantic for the complete disaster that was their big old festival. Like, he actually flew in from out of country or something for it and was super salty about how poorly it went. And a friend of mine tells me that the servers were crap during the festival, even if you weren't there. So, good job. But speaking of Pokemon, this will be our Pokemon news segment. Pokemon the movie I Choose You will be shown worldwide in November. This is a Pokemon movie that sort of retells the first couple episodes of the TV series, minus Misty and Brock. People are pretty salty about that. It just pulled two new characters out of nowhere, which really bothers me. It's like, okay, fine, if you're going to replace Misty and Brock, at least put, like, Leaf in there, you know? But no, we're gonna retell the beginning of Pokemon, except with two made-up characters. I don't think I care about that movie. A lot of people are super salty about that film. I can't blame them. I am too. Also, apparently August 14th, GameStop will be giving out free level 50 Salazzles. I don't know why. Salazzle's not a legendary. Admittedly, everyone loves Salazzle for various reasons, but Salazzle's not a... I have a Salazzle. I could get one on my own, but no, GameStop's gonna just give them out. I don't know. This event doesn't make sense. If anyone has an explanation for this event, I tell you to let me know, but I'm actually kind of hard to contact. It's like, okay. Geez, anything else Pokemon related? No, not really. That should handle Pokemon. But the closest we can come is the Splatoon 2 Ketchup versus Mayonnaise battle, which will be this weekend, August 4th and 5th. And for once, it is actually a Splatfest that is worldwide. Frequently, the Splatfests in Splatoon are country-specific. Like, when we got the Ice Cream versus Cake Splatfest, Japan had the Pop versus Rock Splatfest. Frequently, they do things like that. But this time, hey, the whole world gets to fight over ketchup versus mayonnaise. If you knew me, you'd know I am Team Ketchup. I eat a lot of ketchup. So, that happened. Moving right along, Final Fantasy 15 has been patched, and strangely they added a new combat mechanic out of nowhere, called the Rush Link. And I go, wait, the what? No, So there's a new way you can team up with your teammates. So you just made the combat better, what, is it like half a year after the game was released? Well, good job now, thumbs up! Final Fantasy 15 baffles me. The game spends 10 years in development, closer to more like 3 or 4 years in development, because most of the time it was spent in development on PlayStation 3 was just Nomura farting around. They barely had any of the game finished when they canceled it that one time. So, they've been farting around with this game for a while. It was supposed to be a spin-off. It turned into a mainline Final Fantasy title. And then they threw everything at it, and they're like, oh man, we gotta have a movie, and we gotta have a mobile game, and now they're making another mobile game, and then we're gonna have an anime series, and we're gonna have this side-scrolling beat-em-up, and we're just gonna make all this stuff, and Final Fantasy 15 is gonna be just the biggest thing, and I think it's time to move on, Square. I mean, I want the multiplayer mode. That sounds fun, but there is a point where you're like, is it really worth it for Square to keep patching Final Fantasy 15? I mean, what a way to say our game was not complete. We'll complete it later. What? Meanwhile, they also patched in a DLC item / mechanic, which is the exosuits. Which, unfortunately, I think they made them gray now. Originally, they were actually Power Rangers outfits, and then they were afraid of being sued by the people behind the new Power Rangers movie because the exosuits were so close to those. So I think they made them all gray for that. But what it is you can use them once a day, and they give you, invincibility for a limited amount of time. So that's wacky. And also, speaking of limited times, the Chocobo Moogle Carnival event is going on in 15. Are you a single-player game, or are you an MMORPG? Have you made up your mind? I don't. I will definitely say Final Fantasy 15 is so much better than 13. I will definitely say Final Fantasy 15 had a good movie. I love Kingsglaive. Kingsglaive's great. If you haven't seen Kingsglaive, I really enjoyed that film. I thought it was good. But 15 as a whole baffles me because they just keep patching and growing it and making it better now. I don't understand. I don't understand. I just don't understand. Hey, let's talk about the other big RPG series, though. Dragon Quest. Dragon Quest 11, believe it or not, is out in Japan. And, yeah. Dragon Quest 11's out in Japan, and in 2 days, it sold 2 million copies. Now, 2 million might not sound like a big sales figure, except that they sold that in 2 days. But you have to remember, we're talking about Japan. Just Japan. Has not been sold anywhere else in the world, just Japan, 2 million Dragon Quest 11s. Anyone familiar with Dragon Quest knows that the series has a legendary history in Japan. Supposedly there are actually laws that Dragon Quest games can only be released on a Sunday because so many people take off work and school to buy their Dragon Quests. And yeah, it's the game that is credited with creating the JRPG. There were Japanese RPGs before it, but it codified the more simplified gameplay of Japanese RPGs, which, before anyone gets on my case about that, that was literally the point of the game, because old Western RPGs were complicated, convoluted messes, and they were a super niche genre in Japan, and then Enix was like, hey, what if we took this and simplified it so it would have more mainstream appeal and more people could get into RPGs? And that's what they did, and that created Dragon Quest, and ever since then it has been a smash hit and a stalwart of the genre. It changes very slowly and tries to stay as close to the design of classic 8-bit Japanese RPGs without being outdated. Like, it evolves in such an interestingly slow way, where it's like, we are going to try to be as close to an 8-bit RPG as possible without being a busted, archaic grind fest that makes everyone pull their hair out. Which is an interesting balancing act to pull, but from my experience with Dragon Quest IX, they pulled it off. Dragon Quest IX is one of my favorite RPGs of all time. It is phenomenal. If you haven't played it, oh egad, dig it out of a bargain bin, because it is so good. That was on DS, by the way. And that is, like, technically the previous Dragon Quest game, because 10 was an MMO, which still isn't out in America. I actually worry about Dragon Quest XI's US release. I'm going to be honest with you. I think things might go wrong with that. But we'll talk more about that later and more in depth after a short break. With some diverse PSAs for your diverse mind. Remember, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music and PSAs for your diverse mind. I will be back after a short break. Thank you so much for listening. So please listen to these messages. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. That was My Opponent by Sleepy J and Goodagoon. Anyway, I'm your host, Jell. This is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Terribly sorry about the rough start to the show, but certain things just did not go right today. But I'm happy to be here. So, before the break, I mentioned that I am worried about Dragon Quest XI coming to the States. Well, good news. The PlayStation 4 version, at least, has been confirmed for America. If you're unfamiliar, in Japan, Dragon Quest XI is on both PlayStation 4 and 3DS. And there's a Nintendo Switch version in the works. This is particularly interesting because the PS4 version is not a port of the 3DS version. The 3DS game, get this, has like cute, super deformed 3D graphics and looks a lot like Dragon Quest IX on the top screen. Meanwhile, on the bottom screen, it has 2D Super Nintendo style pixel art. And you play both of them simultaneously. It's the exact same game, just with two different graphical styles. On the 3DS, and then on PS4, we have a third graphical style using Unreal Engine 4 to look freaking gorgeous. Well, they have confirmed Dragon Quest XI will be coming to America, and now the question is, how bad will they screw up the translation? Because Dragon Quest has certain pieces of Japanese-ness that don't translate well to a mainstream audience. I'm trying to think of a good way to put it. The main concern for me is the character of Sylvia, the entertainer, who is a dude who uses a whip of love and feminine skills. Now, you would think it's 2017, this kind of character should be able to be translated no problem, except that, unfortunately, translation companies have had a wonky history with characters like this, even in the modern day. Some of them just take it a little bit too far. I'm trying to find a good way to say it. They like to overuse the letter X, if you get my drift. And on the other hand, companies like to scrub away and alter certain elements that are deemed as too extreme about this kind of character because they think it might maybe be offensive. My point is, I'm really concerned about what they're going to do with Sylvia. Will they overdo it or underdo it, or will they actually translate the game properly? And I don't have a lot of faith there, considering how Final Fantasy Type 0 turned out with the way they translated some of the Moogles in that game. And that was sort of a Square Enix translation. And that's why I'm concerned about what's going to happen with Sylvia. Then there's the character of Martina the martial artist, who is our token sexy character. Every Dragon Quest game, well, every Dragon Quest game since 3, I should say, has had a character that gets some of the female goof-off skills, if you're familiar with that. And yeah, Martina does apparently have a sexy beam and a puff-puff attack. They don't actually show anything, but it is in there, and it is a question of will they remove it once again from the game. Oh, Dragon Quest, you give us no end of troubles. I will be disappointed by any censoring. I would love this game to come out completely uncensored and just happen. That would be great. I hope we get all the versions. I hope it's uncensored. I will absolutely pick it up, even though I have to admit, even though I call this show GameBabble, which is a Dragon Quest reference, my history with the Dragon Quest series is weird. I mean, obviously, I played the first one, but in general, I like the spin-offs more than the main series, except for 3 and 9. Dragon Quest 3 and Dragon Quest 9 are my favorite entries in the series. I love those games. I wish they did more games like 3 and 9. And that's because those are the make-a-party ones. I love make-a-party RPGs. Like in Dragon Quest 3, other than your hero, who you get to choose the gender of, everyone else in your party is just a generic class. You go to the bar and it's like, what do you want? You want a warrior, a monk, a merchant? What you want? Get some wizards, get some clowns? You can have clowns in your party. And you just formed a party of whatever you wanted to. And I loved that about Dragon Quest 3. And then Dragon Quest 9 was basically an evolution of that with better character customization. And I love those kind of games. And those are the only ones in the Dragon Quest series that do the whole full custom party thing. Dragon Quest 11 will not be doing that. It looks like we have a very generic hero, unfortunately. But the entire rest of the party, they are indeed pre-made and have actual personality. I already mentioned Sylvia and Martina. But I am excited to play it because the presentation looks great, and they just put so much effort into Dragon Quest 11 that I can't not be interested. And speaking of interesting, get a load of this. According to Wikipedia, I mentioned that Dragon Quest XI sold 2 million units in 2 days. Apparently, the 3DS version did outsell the PS4 version. DS version sold 1.13 million units, whereas the PS4 one sold 0.95 million units. So just below a million, just a little bit outselling it. And egad, that is going to contribute to that game's sales. Because with effectively 3 different graphical iterations of this game, who can resist buying 2 copies? It blows my mind that they even did this. That they're like, yeah, we're just going to make the same game 3 times. It'll be fine. What? Only Dragon Quest, people. Only Dragon Quest. I'm very excited to play it. As I said, worried about how the localization's going to go. I hope it gets a very raw translation. I hope they keep everything in. Don't change a thing. Just make it M-rated if you have to. I don't think if this gets M-rated, I would laugh, but make it M-rated if you have to. I don't care. Try to keep it as close to the original translation as possible. It's not going to happen. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, that's what's going on with Dragon Quest XI. I look forward to a US release. And yeah, moving right along. So for Overwatch, August 8th, Lucio Ball and the Summer Games skins will be back. Some old ones, some new ones. So that's a thing. And also, they just announced both a Persona 3 and Persona 5 dancing game for PlayStation Vita and PlayStation 4. They'll both be coming out in Japan in spring 2018. That, of course, raises the question, why aren't they just one game? I'm just going to... But those games actually have a story mode, and I'm going to assume they're actually going to put in the effort to make them 2 separate story modes and give them each a meaty song list. I kind of want these. I kind of want these super bad. That's always been a problem with me. It's like, I didn't pick up Persona 4 Dancing All Night, but a lot of that is because I don't care about Persona 4. I kind of like Persona 3 and 5 more. It's a weird thing. Persona 4 just didn't jive with me. I'm really sorry, people. It just didn't. The intro was too long. The character designs were a little too dry compared to 3 and 5. I just couldn't get into Persona 4 the way I could the other ones. And even that, well, I'm getting into Persona 5 way more than anything else. And I'm always going to be mildly annoyed that they didn't differentiate Persona 3, 4, and 5. Because Persona 1 and 2 are so different from these. I have a friend who is a hardcore Persona 1 fan, and they really should have called Persona 3, 4, and 5 Shin Persona. But now I'm rambling. But that's what I do here on GameBabble. I ramble a lot. Especially on a day as awkwardly disorganized as this. So, I'm thinking we're going to have a break coming up soon before I really dive deep into this next topic. Oh, saw something I forgot, so I'll mention that in a minute. But yeah, I kind of want to talk after a break, after about 1 o'clock-ish. We will start talking about the NES Classic, Super NES Classic, and sort of the history behind systems like that, because apparently everyone in the world forgot. We'll also talk about the Genesis Classic HD debacle. There's actually a lot to talk about here. And I just remembered I should be playing music. I'm sorry. I woke up with my brain full of feathers or something. I feel extra dumb today. You ever had a day like that? I don't know. Anyway, though, one more piece of news, and then I'm going to kick it back to the music, because I should be playing music. More piece of news. .hack GU Final Recode, which is the PlayStation... See what I mean about being stupid? My tongue doesn't even want to work. It is the PlayStation 4 enhanced re-release of the .hack GU series. They're going to re-release .hack GU volumes 1, 2, and 3 all in one package. Enhanced graphics, enhanced gameplay, new features. And they've just announced it's going to have a new episode. So even if you played .hack GU 1, 2, and 3, you're going to want to play it again for .hack GU 4 out of nowhere, which will introduce 2 new characters and a new transformation for Haseo, which is the name of the main character, by the way. What? Okay, whatever. So, geez, they are really making that .hack GU a must-buy game for a freaking re-release. I really hope it's true that the controls are going to be more responsive, even though it means the game will probably be mashier, because I really liked regular .hack more than GU in terms of gameplay. So I'm hoping this will fix up my complaints about .hack GU's gameplay. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but cripes, now I'm just scratching my head and super interested. And yes, I would love it if they'd re-release .hack Classic. Anyway, coming up next, we got Blue by 7 Star here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Please enjoy the music, and thank you so much for listening. We will be back shortly. Hello, you're listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave, diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and that was Smartphones by Trey Songs. And this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Once again, I'm your host, Jell. So, strap yourselves in. We're talking NES and SNES classics. First of all, apparently the NES Classic managed to resurface and piss people off. Amazon has some kind of thing they do where they have trucks full of stuff that go around cities and have, like, special flash sales on the street or something? I don't know the full details of it, but they did this, and their special flash sale item was the NES Classic, which pissed off everyone, because the NES Classic is out of print, and if you had enough in stock to sell them on the streets of various big cities like New York and Chicago, why couldn't we order them online? Literally, everyone else is like, what the crap is up with this? Especially because of New York, because New York actually has the Nintendo store there, so they probably have the best chance of getting an NES Classic. I mean, population density, but still, people are like, if you have enough NES Classics to pull this off, why didn't you sell them online? Why didn't you give the rest of us a chance? Moving right along, though, to the Super NES Classic, they put them up accidentally for pre-order on Walmart's website and were pre-ordered out near instantaneously, even though that happened, in the middle of the night, at midnight, at 1 a.m. Super Nintendo Classics were up. It trended on Twitter when this happened. But Walmart has canceled all of these pre-orders because it was an accident, which will probably piss off some of the few people that actually managed to get a pre-order. And Nintendo themselves have said, no, pre-orders will begin towards the end of August. Once again, there will be Super NES Classic pre-orders. They will begin at the end of August. And, that's all the details we've got. We've got no clue on a date. We have no clue on what outlets. Nintendo just says, hey, we're gonna sell, the Super NES Classic pre-orders begin at the end of August. And I'm like, well, that's great. And it says, we will be shipping a quote-unquote significant amount of systems. No one trusts or believes them. Because the hype for the Super NES Classic is just way too high. Nintendo, no one believes they'll be able to meet demand. I don't believe they'll be able to meet demand. This is going to be a disaster. Because like I said, the Super NES Classic is way more desirable than the NES Classic because of Star Fox 2. Once again, the version that you downloaded with questionable legality off the internet is not the complete game. Nintendo has the complete game. We don't know if the complete game will be on the SNES Classic, but if it's not, it would be very, very weird. I mean, yes, the NES Classic used ROMs downloaded off the internet. People actually hacked the system and found, proof of who ripped the ROMs. It's a weird, long story. But, apparently when people rip their game cartridge ROMs, they tend to put, an ID tag on it saying who the rip was from. And people looked into it and were able to track down, who ripped the ROMs and what site they came from on the NES Classic. But it would be very weird for Star Fox 2 because the quote-unquote complete version online is a fan translation. The regular ROM is completely in Japanese, and the fan translation makes it clear that it's a fan translation, so it would be weird if Nintendo used that fan translation and didn't use the one from Mother 3. So it should logically be the actual Star Fox 2 on there, and even if it's not, well, it is now. This is going to be the first official release of Star Fox 2, and that is going to drum up hype and sales, coupled with the fact that the NES Classic was so legendary as a expensive top-selling item for scalpers, that these scalpers will be out in, double force for this stupid thing. So yeah, no matter how much Nintendo ships, I don't think they will meet demand. I will personally be shocked, utterly shocked, if they actually manage to meet demand for once. Because what Nintendo pulled with Amiibos was extra stupid. Because the annoying thing with Amiibos, if you remember the friggin' Amiibo craze and madness with people trying to get their hands on those, was the fact that they were coming out of Nintendo's ears in Japan. Everyone was like, oh, if you really want an Amiibo, just import it. Pay the extra money and import an Amiibo, and you can get whatever you want to, because they're nice and easy to get in Japan. It's just in America, Nintendo ships no Amiibos. It was really dumb. and I don't know if that was the case with the Famicom Classic, though. Anyway, yeah, I think the Famicom Classic sold stupid well, too. But anyway, so that's the deal with the Super NES Classic. Now, let's move on to sort of the stupid twist to this. You might have heard something about a Sega Genesis Classic HD. And people are getting so super excited about that. And then, oh wow, Atari's releasing a retro console. What's with this? Everyone's releasing retro consoles. They're jumping on the NES Classic bandwagon. No. The NES Classic is jumping on their bandwagon. I actually had someone ask me about this last night, and I found it kind of hilarious because these kinds of systems have been being sold since at least 2003, and they never stopped. They've been releasing NES Classic style consoles for years before Nintendo actually decided to jump on the bandwagon. It really all begins with the Jakks Pacific TV Games plug-and-play Activision 10-in-1, which was this little battery-powered controller you plugged into your TV with a terrible rubber D-pad that had 10 different Atari 2600 games from Activision built into it. And people were like, wow, that's the coolest thing ever. And all of a sudden, everyone wanted to do a plug-and-play. And Jakks Pacific was just churning these out like crazy. Soon they did an Atari joystick you plugged into your TV. And then like a Atari Pong paddle that you plugged into your TV with a bunch of built-in games. And then they did like a more arcade-style joystick with Pac-Man and a bunch of Namco games on it. And then Miss Pac-Man. And there's like a bunch of these. I used to almost collect these things because they were so stupid cheap. And there was a certain charm to having this little joystick that you plug into your TV and it just has arcade games on it. Like the Miss Pac-Man one I felt was really good. It was weird that the first stage was orange instead of pink, but other than that, like the Miss Pac-Man plug-and-play was really neat. There's a Taito plug-and-play. There's a Konami plug-and-play that was kind of wonky. I know Namco themselves released their own Pac-Man plug-and-play with Pac-Man 256, and it's like shaped like a pixel art Pac-Man, and that one actually isn't very good, surprisingly enough. But like they did a bunch of these. I know what you're thinking now, though. You're like, okay, yeah, but those were little plug-and-play controllers that you plugged into your TV. Not like things shaped like consoles. Well, that started in 2004 with the Atari Flashback, which was shaped like an Atari 7800, except super small, with little Atari 7800 controllers attached to it, and it had a bunch of Atari games built into it. And then they did the Atari Flashback 2 and 3, and we're actually on 7 now, and I'm hearing something about an Atari Flashback 8 Gold? I don't know what that is. But yeah, they did these little miniature Atari consoles you could plug into your TV. And then, like, there's an Intellivision and a ColecoVision flashback console. That was sort of a thing. They did these flashback systems, and that's basically what the NES Classic is. Now, the Sega Genesis, what about that? Well, AtGames has been producing plug-and-play Sega Genesis systems for a while. There's been a ton of them. Some of them have just had built-in games. Others accepted cartridges. And this is where we get into the word of warning territory, because I've played AtGames' other plug-and-play Sega Genesis systems, and they're bad. Like, they come with a handful of Sega Genesis games, and then a handful of developed in-house chintzy, like, Chinese-made bootleg games. And, like, they did one shaped kind of loosely like Sonic's head that had an SD card port, so that way you could add more games to it from their website, except the games were literally just Mega Drive ROM files. So I was actually able to just load up any downloaded ROM onto the thing. And that thing was terrible bad, though, because if you played a game that had, like, really fancy visual effects on it, it would constantly glitch up, and the sound quality was terrible on these things. All the music was off-key. Even on the built-in games, the sound quality was terrible. And guess what? That big, expensive Sega Genesis HD that you're seeing that comes out like September 22nd, guess what? That's from @Games. Same people, same developers, and there have been a lot of pre-reviews all saying, buyer beware, don't buy this, it's terrible. Except, there's one person who's like a hardcore collector who picked this up and was like, this is actually pretty nice. This is pretty okay. People are blowing this out of proportion. And I watched his video, and it didn't quite give me the information I needed, but it gave me a hint of it. In his video, he showed that the Genesis HD is a huge improvement over @Games' previous ones. And the sound quality is noticeably better. And it really tries to copy the style of the NES Classic with, like, the built-in save state system and the nice menu and all of that. It still comes with, like, the chintzy bootleg games. But, yeah, it actually seems kind of nice. The question is it nice enough to justify the price tag? Because that thing's actually kind of expensive. And unfortunately, I don't know. It's not out yet. I don't have the connections to get one, and I'm not sure if I'd want to spend the money on taking that kind of a risk when I can just use a real Sega Genesis. So, what I'm saying is whatever you do, do not pre-order the Sega Genesis HD. Do not pre-order it. Do not expect it to be good. Wait until it comes out. Let someone else take the fall. And wait for the YouTube comparison videos, because that's what really matters. When the YouTube comparison videos come out, because someone has to do them. Someone has to do, here's a Sega Genesis, here's the new Sega Genesis HD. Let's compare the audio quality and the video quality. Let's talk about what games it can run. Yo, can it run Virtua Racing? Can it run Gunstar Heroes? Can it run Bonanza Brothers? Those are like, what about Sonic and Knuckles? Those are like some of the really weird ones. How does it handle all of these? How does it work? And that's the question we really have to ask. Wait until those videos come out. Watch them on YouTube. I will do my best when it comes out to watch the videos on YouTube and tell you what I think, because I will likely not be purchasing this thing. But all I can say is it looks like it really is an improvement over @Games' previous Sega Genesis plug-and-play garbage. But I'm not sure if it's actually worth the price. Because considering how garbage @Games' previous output was, yeah. So, I'm going to say just buyer beware for right now. But since all of these things have existed forever, why is the NES Classic different? Why is it interesting? Why is everyone so hyped about it? And the answer is because it's first-party Nintendo. See, all of these things are licensed by Atari and Sega. They gave the okay, they gave the permission, they gave the thumbs up, but they didn't make them. They're made by @Games and Jakks Pacific. They're made by toy companies and just weird companies. And they don't have that same kind of quality. Whereas the NES Classic, that is in-house Nintendo as far as I know. It gets there, and even if it's not, it's something they watched over rigorously. It gets the Nintendo seal of quality, you could say. Because that's, Nintendo's putting their name on it. They want it to be a really quality product. You know, if they're going to pull this kind of short numbers, limited edition, oh, look at this, you can plug your controllers into your Nintendo Wiimotes kind of BS, they got to make sure that this unit is of decent quality. Unfortunately, I do not have an NES Classic because I wasn't that excited about basically, my deal on the NES Classic was I'm going to wait until it hits stores and then I'll buy one. I did not know, because Nintendo did not inform anyone, that the NES Classic was going to be a limited edition thing, that they were going to produce so few numbers. I thought, hey, there's plug-and-plays everywhere. I'm sure more people will buy the NES Classic, but Nintendo will produce enough of these. They're cheap enough to produce. People are going to love the thing, so they'll make tons of them, and I'll just pick one up at a store at the regular price. Never happened, because, we forgot to tell you it's a limited edition special. We're only producing it for 2 months kind of thing. Oh, wait, everyone's angry at us. Well, we'll produce a few more, but now we're done. Stupid Nintendo. So, since I didn't know that, I never played the NES Classic, so I cannot tell you how the quality compares to a real system versus everything else. But from what I've seen, that's the general idea, is that it is a higher quality, more polished, in-house, first-party sort of thing. And that's why people got so excited for it. That's why people were like, oh, wow, that's the coolest thing. But, I mean, admittedly, people got excited for the Atari Flashback consoles, too. People really liked those. So, yeah, people absolutely got excited for the NES Classic, and now they'll be doing it even harder for the Super NES Classic. And that's what the deal is. I just find it funny, though, that everyone just got sudden amnesia about all these plug-and-plays. Because I remember when the NES Classic came out, there were a bunch of news stores like, oh, Sega's jumping on the bandwagon, they're making a Sega Genesis Classic. It's like, yeah, we sold that at Walgreens like 2 years ago. What's the deal? Is it different? Is it from At Games? Oh, no, it's the exact same Genesis Classic I sold at Walgreens years ago. So that's what's going on there. My point is, anyone making a big deal about all these new neo-retro plug-and-play consoles and acting like the NES Classic has started something amazing, it didn't. It really didn't. The NES Classic was jumping on their bandwagon. Whew! So that's a lot of screaming. Hope you enjoyed that rant. I'm going to kick you back to the music and take a slightly longer break. Oh, I need a drink. And when we get back, that is a very good question. I'll let you know when we get back. I know we definitely have some Senran Kagura announcements. I guess we'll talk Senran Kagura when I get back, because they announced a pile of new Senran Kagura stuff. It's gonna be tricky figuring out how to discuss that series on the air, but they announced everything for that. So, until then, here is Speak to a Girl by Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Stay tuned. Thank you so much for listening. Please enjoy. And after a little bit, we will be right back with more GameBabble Live here on Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Sorry for that slightly extra long break. I just needed it after all that talking. Woo! Not to mention I got caught up looking up some other things. So, I think we will save the Senran Kagura-thon for after 2, because there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Senran Kagura. And oh, it's going to be awkward talking about these games, because they announced, like, cripes, 5, 6 games? And a new season of the anime? Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah, 5 games, and some DLC, and the anime is getting the second season. So that's good. That's good for us crazy, slightly disturbing Senran Kagura fans. Good times. Did just find out, though, apparently Splatoon 2 has a big horrible bug in it that Nintendo is working on fixing, but it's kind of embarrassing. Apparently, if you go to League Battle past records, the game crashes. Yeah, one of those things they couldn't really test in the Splatfests. And that's kind of embarrassing. Hey, we have a feature, and when you use it, the game crashes. It's kind of embarrassing. It would be considered pretty normal for other companies, though, so I can't get on their case too terribly hard. So that is certainly certainly a thing. Certainly a thing. Also, if you're wondering about the Persona 3 and 5 dancing games, it is Persona 3 Dancing Moon Knight and Persona 5 Dancing Star Knight. Yeah, they're both going to be on PS4 and Vita. I don't know. I'm kind of excited about them. Oh, also, Fire Emblem Warriors has a permadeath feature, which I think, let me double check this, but I think that can be turned on and off. In addition, that won't allow you to deploy characters once they've fallen in battle. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be able to be turned off or not, but that'll be interesting because, yeah, permadeath was one of the hallmarks of the Fire Emblem series, and incorporating it into Fire Emblem Warriors is certainly a nice way to Fire Emblemify the game and make it, you know, resemble its source material. Koei Tecmo generally does a good job, you know, when they make a Warriors game based on an existing series, you know, doing stuff like that. That's always been one of the things I love about that company and about that series. I really need to do more videos on that. Is that when they do a Warriors game based on a license, they try to incorporate some features to make it more strongly resemble that license. And yeah, that'll be awkward and interesting. Having Warriors with permadeath wouldn't be the first one, though. Apparently, that new Valkyria Chronicles game is a more Warriors-like game. Like, it's not a proper strategy RPG. It's some kind of weird action Dynasty Warriors-esque game that also has permadeath. So, it's very, very weird and interesting. Okay. So, good times there. Yeah, it's weird how slow this week has generally been with all of the everything. But we've had so many just big, meaty release weeks. We had a pile of just fighting game stuff come out. Just last week, we got a bunch of VR games coming out. And now it's like the entire industry needs to take a breather. Which is good. But it does mean that I don't have a lot to talk about on the show right now. Although I'm going to say I'm still loving Final Fantasy XII. I know you probably haven't been watching my streams of Final Fantasy XII based on the viewer count, but I'm going to pretend you do, and egad! If you hit up the GameBabble YouTube channel, which is like youtube.com/user/GameBabble show, I think that's how those URLs work. If not, it would just be /GameBabble show, all one word. I put up archives of my streams of Final Fantasy XII. Been trying to play through the whole game on stream while just gushing about how much I love it. And the last one, like, if you want to see probably what I felt was the best part of Final Fantasy XII, a part that really solidifies how much I like that game, go check out the most recent one, part 5 of my playthrough, because we get to a really nice cutscene at the Garif encampment that really just exemplifies how good Final Fantasy XII's story really was. Because a lot of people just wrote it off as, oh, it's just Star Wars. When, okay, on the surface it's Star Wars, but beneath the surface there's so much more to it. And it really, like, made Vaughn, of all characters, actually pretty decent, and made me say, you know what? He's okay. He's okay to be in the party. He's not much of a protagonist, but he's okay here. And, yeah, it really, there weren't any, like, really big events, but it really reminded me why I feel so strongly about Final Fantasy XII being good. Also, I got mobbed by a pile of slimes, and it went really, really poorly, and it's kind of hilarious watching me struggle against this, level grind-tastical trap that I fell into. Anyway, I'm going to kick you back to the music, and then, at about a little after 2 o'clock, I will begin telling you about all the recent Senran Kagura news as best I can. Coming up next, though, is Help by Papa Roach, here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. Hello, you are listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Joe. This is GameBabble Live, and that was Somebody Else Will by Justin Moore. Anyway, GameBabble Live, video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. And before we begin talking about Senran Kagura, I have good news for all my fellow Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball fans. VR mode is coming to the Asian version tomorrow. Thank freaking goodness I don't have to start smashing heads. Seriously, I was a little on edge about this one. So you're probably going to be like, wait, what's going on? Well, if you're unfamiliar, Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball 3 did come out. Except it didn't come out in America. See, the company, when asked about this, outright said, yeah, we're afraid of the backlash we're going to get, likely because of Marie Rose, but they were like, we're afraid of the backlash we're going to get from Western journalists and stuff, so we're not releasing the game in the States. And that pissed off a lot of people, but they were like, we will release the game in English in Asia. Like, if you get one from Hong Kong or Korea, you'll get it, you can switch it between Japanese and English. So, okay, that's a thing, and then after that, a bunch of, people got pissed, and a bunch of game journalists lied through their teeth, saying that the series doesn't sell in America anyway, and people are making a mountain out of a molehill, and it's a non-traversy. It's like, no, half that series' sales are in America. And honestly, the game wound up being weaker than other titles in the series, partially because of this, because it was made exclusively for a Japanese audience, and thus has a much lower budget than previous Extreme Beach Volleyball games. Anyway, they announced that there would be a VR mode for the game way, way early on, and it was like, okay, cool, there's going to be a VR mode. And it wound up pretty much just being like a model viewer type thing. And there was a brief, like that briefly made national news because even though the game wasn't even coming to America, people, the idiots at Polygon, blew the entire thing wildly out of proportion. The VR mode has since been toned down a bit from what was shown, but it came out on the Japanese version like months ago? Like almost half a year ago? And it's like, what the crap? It's just a model viewer. Where's the Asian version? I've been friggin' tweeting constantly like, where's VR mode? Where's VR mode? Where's VR mode? You don't have to translate anything. It's done. It's in the Japanese release. And a bunch of people started cooking up this theory that there was some kind of ratings issue where if the VR mode was implemented, the game would have to be re-rated, and thus the Asian release would never get VR mode. And this pissed me off, because I've already dumped probably 30 hours into the Asian release, and being told, oh yeah, no, you don't get to play that in VR, I was like, screw you. Now, the real question is if I will be able to play on my US account, or if I'm actually going to have to start the game over on my Asian account. But either way, we're finally getting VR mode now, and so it's like, okay, that theory's finally out the window. VR mode is happening. and yay. Speaking of VR modes, Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash is also getting a VR mode, but it is still in the works, which segues us kind of clunkily into our next topic, good old Senran Kagura. What can you say about it? If you're unfamiliar, it is a series of mostly high-flying Dynasty Warriors style hack and slash combat. Like, imagine combining Dynasty Warriors with Marvel vs. Capcom 2, where it's tons of dashing and air combos. And that's pretty much what Senran Kagura is, except with a major focus on ninja girls in bikinis. Let's just put it that way. Amongst many, many other things. It is a game that honestly looks at the Dead or Alive Extreme Beach Volleyball series and says, hold my beer, and completely blows it out of the water with its level of lewdness, which honestly is more comical than anything else. Especially if you see those special finishes from Estival Versus, those are hilarious. Those are legitimately hilarious. Anyway, the guy behind the series has actually created his own studio now, just for making these kinds of games, called Honey Parade, and they have announced 5 new Senran Kagura games. First of all, Senran Kagura 7 will be coming next year, fall 2018 for Japan, which makes me kind of happy, because that means they are putting in some serious time to actually make a good, polished Senran Kagura game. The Senran Kagura series began as cheap, chintzy, kind of wonky hack and slashes, but now that it has gotten so popular and has international releases, they're putting in more time, more effort, and I really hope that Senran Kagura 7 is something truly incredible, and that will be the first mainline entry in the series on consoles. Yeah, what you might not know is that all the PS4 and Steam releases of Senran Kagura, and the Vita ones, those are all spin-offs. Those aren't the core story. The core story has been on 3DS, and the core Senran Kagura games, of which there are 2, so the third core game is 7. I'll explain in a minute. 1 and 2 are on 3DS, and they're side-scrollers, and they have way more serious storyline and character development. Now, the spin-offs, Shinobi Versus, Estival Versus, Peach Beach Splash, those are all still canon, but they're spin-offs. Shinobi Versus is just, the first one is about how hard it is being in ninja school and, the nature of ninja school and dueling between these two schools over ancient scrolls. And the second one is about, sort of a civil war in the yokai world and monsters being summoned and bursting through into Japan. And, they have more of a story. Whereas Shinobi Versus is just, oh, hey, there's a ninja tournament. And Estival Versus is just, oh, hey, everyone randomly got teleported to a beach that exists between life and death. Okay, and Peach Beach Splash is literally, oh, hey, we're going to have a televised ancient ninja squirt gun tournament that has been going on since ancient times. What? That's, by the way, the next one coming to America. It should be here in fall. I have the Japanese version, and it is super fun. Not fantastic. Honestly, I haven't played it in a while, because that game has gotten a ton of balance patches, and I really hated the card system, because the shield and disable, it has this weird card system, where you can put up a shield and get limited invincibility, and then there's another one you can use to disable an opponent's ability to reload, and I just felt those cards were, horrifically overpowered, and everyone just kind of spammed them online. It was awful. But other than that, the game was super fun, even though it did have some weird frame rate hiccups. But I haven't played it in a while. I should play it again. Maybe I should stream that tonight. Play a little bit of Peach Beach Splash again and see how things have evolved. Because the US release is coming. But yeah, so those are all canon. Those all still happen. It's just, those are a lot of goofing around. They're very story-light. So this is the 7th Senran Kagura game, even though the Rhythm Cooking game said it wasn't canon. It does count that. This is the 7th Senran Kagura game, but it's, the 3rd one with an actually serious storyline. And by the way, that'll be on PS4. Now, as I said, the PS4 is behind. It has not gotten any of the core games. Well, they're kind of sort of fixing that. They also announced Senran Kagura Burst Renewal. Burst is the expanded version of the first game, which easily has the best storyline. Like that one, I'm not kidding, Senran Kagura Burst actually kind of made me cry. Mostly because of the Hebijo storyline. Hebijo is the evil ninja school. And it focuses on, who are the villains? Why would you choose to be an evil ninja? And the reason is, the good ninja school has strict regulations. You have to be spotless and sterling and come from a ninja family to really become a good ninja. Meanwhile, the evil ninjas, they'll accept anybody. You could just walk right in and become an evil ninja. Sure, why not? But the only way out is death. Once you become an evil ninja, that's it. You are in for life. If you try to escape, you will be murdered. And so it winds up being like, who would join an evil ninja school? Why? And oh, egad, the backstories on all the Hebijo girls. It seriously got me to tear up a ton of times, and then seeing them actually become friends, even though they are, all so, broken. It was a bit heavy for me, which is really awkward when you see what the game looks like, and you play the other ones that are a lot of silly goofing around. So the fact that the first game actually managed to make me feel that way was interesting. Unfortunately, the first game is the wonkiest one. It's on 3DS, but most of the game is just in 2D. It's a very janky side-scroller with terrible frame rate. The remake for PS4, though, is going to be based, for better or for worse, off Shinobi and Estival Versus. It will be 3D, and that definitely disappoints me, because I kind of like the 2D side-scroller setup for Senran Kagura more. And I don't like the fact that they are kind of all just becoming Dynasty Warriors clones instead of something interesting like a side-scroller. But, that said, that makes it easier to make. Like they said, they're not just gonna, here's the same game but in HD. No, they're going to build off the Estival Versus engine, recycle that to make this, and they're adding in a new chapter that will tell what all the new characters that were introduced in Shinobi Versus and Estival Versus, what were they doing during the events of the first game. So that'll definitely make it worthwhile to play. They will try to expand it, and this says to me that Senran Kagura 7 should hopefully be so much more than just yet another Estival Versus, because some people can't even tell the difference between Estival and Shinobi Versus, even though there is a significant difference, especially graphically. And the reason they're doing this is because sales tripled when they went from 3DS to PS4, which, by the way, is unusual. Because, like I said, Dragon Quest XI was released on 3DS and PS4, and the 3DS one sold better. Generally speaking, the 3DS has a better install base, and things sell better on it. But, in America, I guess things sell better on PS4, and that's when the series went international, and the PS4 ones, Estival Versus is 1080p 60 FPS silky smooth, because it was also a Vita game. So it's not really using that much of the PS4's power, and so it could run super smooth and actually be super nice, and people, it's on a console, it's on a big screen, and that caused people to really, really like it, and so sales tripled, and that's why the series is shifting to being on PS4, which is making some older fans feel betrayed, because it's like, you started on Nintendo systems, you started on 3DS, what are you doing? There are two Senran Kagura games announced for the Nintendo Switch. However, they are Shinobi Reflet which is a dating sim with Asuka only, though they've said other girls will come as DLC. Okay, whatever. And Peach Ball, which is a pinball game for the Nintendo Switch, and I don't think I need to tell you that the bumpers are not bumpers. Take a wild guess what the bumpers are. You're probably right if you know what Senran Kagura is. They also announced a new cell phone game because, of course. Meanwhile, Peach Beach Splash has just gotten another new DLC character. It's one of the ones from the cell phone games, and like I said, they just announced a new cell phone game is being made. So one of the cell phone game characters is joining Peach Beach Splash, and she's being offered at an extra low price for the first couple weeks as a thank you for everyone that bought the game, and VR mode's still coming. We're still waiting on ours. It got delayed until fall, and that's right, I need to put a pre-order on that. Because for the States, the physical edition will be special edition only. You will not be able to just buy a regular edition of Peach Beach Splash. It's you either buy the special edition, which comes with soundtrack and DLC artwork, and I think it might, I don't know if it has an anime, no, it has a DVD of all the old Senran Kagura openings, but in HD, and and I think it's on a Blu-ray. It comes with a bunch of stuff, and it's not too much more expensive than buying a full-priced regular game. It's just, hey, here's a special edition, and it's I like physical releases. I like Senran Kagura. I like what I've played of Peach Beach Splash. Okay, you win. But, so fair warning, yeah, that is special edition only for the physical copy of Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash. And lastly, they announced, yes, there will be a second season of the anime series. Because they did do a Senran Kagura anime series that did get released in the States, and it kind of retells the story of the first game, but nowhere near as much of a tearjerker as the first one. Just, whoo! School of Whoobies, I swear. So, I believe that covers the Senran Kagura announcements, which will no doubt piss off everyone, but Senran Kagura has its fans. It has its fans for a good reason. It's nice to see a series like this that just does not give a crap what people think. You go. You go, team. Anyway, time to kick you back to the music. Hey, who wants to hear the Alien Ant Farm version of Smooth Criminal? Because that's next on the list here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. Thank you so much for listening. Hello, you're listening to 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind. I'm your host, Jell, and this is GameBabble Live, our video game news and information show, which airs every Wednesday from noon to 3 p.m. Somehow I barked like a dog. I don't know how that happened. Anyway, as you can tell, it's 2:35. We are coming up on the end of the show, so this will probably be our last break, which is good because it's been a slow week. But I've been working, while I was away, I worked on a script for an episode. I still need to record and edit it and figure out what kind of visuals I'm going to use for it. Cripes, I need a lot of footage. But, yeah, an episode on the fact that no one knows anything about video games. What do I mean by no one? I mean no one. I don't know anything about video games. You don't know anything about video games. Game journalists certainly don't know anything about video games. I don't need to tell you, news pundits don't know anything about video games. And so-called experts definitely don't know anything about video games. Why? Because the history of video games is a freaking disaster. It is a mess. And actually understanding any of it is borderline impossible. And this is due to three major factors. Number one, video games are bigger, wider, and more everything than you think they are. You see, you probably think, okay, I know video games, I know the NES, I know the Sega Genesis, I know the Super Nintendo, that's what matters, right? What do you know about the Atari 2600? Oh yeah, I probably played one of those. What about the 7800? What about the Atari EX, the 400, the 800? What about the Atari ST? What do you know about the Intellivision and the VIC-20 and the Commodore 64? Did you know that in Europe, the Commodore 64 was as, if not more popular than the NES? And there's a pile of Commodore 64 games that were only released in Europe. There's this entire history and subculture behind these small Commodore 64 developers. And then you get into like European exclusive computers like the ZX Spectrum. And then you go to Japan. What do you know about the PC-98, which was a Japanese-only computer system? You ever heard of an FM Towns Marty? How about the PCFX? There's so much weird Japanese gaming stuff that happened. And all these things interconnect and link with one another. You know, the Commodore 64 games in Europe get ported to NES and Game Boy, and they get released around the world, but then, like, the original version might actually be better, or might be worse, or there might be some changes. Same thing with Japanese versions. And all these different consoles, and you never know what's going to inspire who, when, where. You know, video games don't even have, like, a centralized Hollywood. From 1985 to 2006, the majority of console video games came from Japan. So Japan is wildly important to the history of video games. But at the same time, there's a history of the computer games in America, and you know darn well computer games count as video games, that they are interlinked and interwoven like that, and no one can know all that stuff. Know what makes it worse? Number 2, video game history is really poorly documented. Why? Because back at the dawn of video games, no one cared. The earliest video games were little hobbyist projects made by a bunch of nobody nerds that would only be usable on a computer, like a super expensive supercomputer in a lab that you have to schedule time for. No one owned home computers back when video games started, and you had to be in a college in a computer science course and show up at midnight when no one's using the computer lab to play Space War on a friggin', like, I think it's the oscilloscope or something? Something very vector graphics based, okay? It's like, yeah, that was the dawn. The earliest video games were nothings made by nobodies, essentially. That's what people would have thought of them at the time. It was just a bunch of college kids goofing around. And then they kind of just became toys, and the only people paying attention were kids. And let me ask you this. How many kids cared about the history of video games? How many looked at what kind of cultural impact certain games would have on other games? How many were paying attention to, like, what games had female leads? This has always been a sore point for me, and part of what caused this, I spent like 5 years researching this. I wanted to do like a history of female video game characters. And right when I thought I had it all figured out, I stumbled across an article that certainly didn't replace what I was trying to do, but rather blew a lot of my theories and concepts out of the water and introduced me to even more ideas. And I realized no one person can honestly know all this. Like, how many little, like, 7, 8-year-old boys were paying attention to what games starred girls, actually looked for them? The only reason I did is because I have an older sister. So thank you very much. But yeah, no one else did. And so, Tomb Raider comes out, and everyone thinks like Lara Croft's one of the first female characters in video games when there are hundreds that predate her. I would like to emphasize that. Hundreds. She really did nothing new. And yeah, but no one knew because we were all 7, 8-year-old boys. Oh yeah, that's who you want to trust the history of video games to. It's documentation to. A bunch of kids. Yeah, we grew up, but all our knowledge of that time period was kid knowledge. We didn't really know anything. Which brings us to the final point. Video game history is caked with misconceptions. Like, do you know how many times I hear people say that fighting games evolved from beat-em-ups? Well, that's funny because the first fighting game came out before the first beat-em-up. Or at the exact same time as the first beat-em-up. So how could fighting games evolve from beat-em-ups? Do you know how many people don't know Street Fighter 1 is a fighting game? No, seriously. A lot of people refuse to believe Street Fighter 1 was a fighting game, even though you can look up video on YouTube and you can get it on PS2 and like Capcom Classics Collection 2. People think, oh no, the first Street Fighter was a beat-em-up and Street Fighter 2 was like the first fighting game. No! There's like this entire period of pre-Street Fighter 2 fighting games that worked on a completely different game design style because they were on home computers that only had one button. So the way they worked was you held down that button and then you hit different directions to do different directional attacks. So you had 8 different attacks, but you had to stop moving to do them, and they were very like aiming based, and that sounds awful until you actually try it and get into it, and those can actually be really fun, and I'd kind of love to see that play style come back. But pre-Street Fighter 2 fighting games were pretty much a genre in and of themselves, and they came from the fact that, Karate Kid got popular, and there was a bunch of stuff about martial arts. It's like, hey, let's do a martial arts tournament simulator on a Commodore 64. What do you get? You get International Karate Plus and Way of the Exploding Fist, But a lot of people say stuff like that. Like, one of the best examples, this is amazing, is that someone sent me to a Wikipedia talk page where someone mentioned that on the entry for Chun-Li, they list her as the first female character in fighting games, first playable female character in fighting games. And someone commented and said, even though this is properly sourced, I can list 5 playable female characters that predate Chun-Li. And I realized I could list 2 more, so that's 7. There are at least 7 playable female characters in fighting games that predate Chun-Li. But here's the thing. Chun-Li being the first female character in fighting games is properly sourced. There's no way to properly source that there were 7 that predated her. How messed up is that? A lie can be properly... Not a lie. A misconception can be properly sourced, but the truth can't. And, well, then how do you know it's the truth? Because title screens. How do you source a video game title screen or flyer? The earliest known female character in fighting games was Yuki from a game called Typhoon Girl, which was released in 1985, which I believe is the same year Karate Champ came out, or 1 year after Karate Champ. And we know it's 1985 because the copyright on the title screen says 1985, the copyright on the flyer says 1985, and if you look at the graphics, yeah, those look like 1985 graphics. So, I think we can safely say that game predated Street Fighter 2 pretty darn well. Actually predated Street Fighter 1. That's something to think about. But you can't source a video game title screen or a flyer. You can't source, well, judging by these graphics, someone would have to write about it, and that someone would have to have some degree of credibility, and it's like there's no credible sources for the truth about video games. Think about that for a second. There's no credible sources for the truth. What kind of messed up, bizarro world is video games? This is what I'm talking about. So, the video games are way bigger than you think they are. They're incredibly poorly documented. And there's so many misconceptions created every day. Like, they still happen. People will still make claims that they think are true, but aren't, but they get passed around, and so everyone repeats them, and it becomes the truth, even though it's not the truth. It's a complete mess, and that's what video game history is. And when it's so impossible to really know everything, when everything is so poorly documented and caked with misconceptions, how, I ask you, how can anyone know anything about video games? Crazy to think about, right? And I know someone's going to go, well, why does that matter? You just play games and have fun. And that's fine. You go ahead and do that. But the fact that literally no one knows anything about video games. That's a problem, because then people could just march right up and make things up. They could just invent video game history if they want to, and put themselves in a place of unwarranted importance, because they can skew history to their desires. There doesn't even need to be any truth to it. They could just make things up and then feel proud about themselves if no one is willing to research and look into these things and really look into video game history. And I'm not saying that you, specifically, listener, need to do that. No, not at all. What I'm saying is, anytime you hear something about video game history, take it with a grain of salt, especially if it's from experts. Because you know what the biggest problem with being an expert is? You think you know everything when you don't. That's the biggest trap you can fall into. And I think that applies to everything, but it applies super hard to video games. Because if you think you're an expert and someone tells you you're wrong, utterly shatters your worldview, then you're like, oh, well, You know, it's like you don't want to believe it. You want to find some excuse to make yourself right. And your mind isn't open enough to new ideas, that the things you thought were true were wrong. For the longest time, we did think Chun-Li was like the first woman in fighting games. And now we look back in the past. Now, thanks to the internet, we can discuss all these strange, obscure games and find 7 that predated her. Because who the heck had a Typhoon Gal arcade machine in their arcades? I didn't. I don't know anyone who did. But now, you know, it's been dumped onto the internet and we can play it through one means or another. And then, one of them is a Commodore 64 game, Barbarian 2. And then there's Legend of the Amazon Women on ZX Spectrum. And ZX Spectrum was like only in Europe. Who knows anything about that system? You'd have to be European. So you need someone from Europe to tell you that game exists for you to go, oh, wow, maybe everything I thought I knew was wrong. It's only by banding together, combining our knowledge, and fact-checking one another, and being willing, more than willing, to have everything we think we know about video games shattered, that we learn more. Good example, the first video game. A lot of people are like, oh, no, it's Pong. But then, I go to the National Video Game Museum back when they had that here, and they were like, no, it's Computer Space. Okay, Computer Space. Fine. Oh, just found out there were actually 2 different Computer Space arcade machines made at the same time, but only one had wide distribution. Okay. And who's the father of video games? Oh, Nolan Bushnell. No? Maybe that title should go to Ralph Baer. Who's that? Oh, he's the guy who made essentially the Odyssey 1, which actually predates the Pong arcade machine. Okay, so we know all this, and then we find out, back in, the 40s, 50s? I should probably Google it. At some radioactive research laboratory, they had this open house, and this guy realized everything they had there was boring, so he made a tennis game on an oscilloscope called Tennis for Two that predates all other video games. And we didn't know about it because the guy dismantled it the next day because it was nothing. Thankfully, I think he kept blueprints, so someone reconstructed the thing. But the first video game only existed for a day and then was dismantled because it didn't mean anything. And now we found in the U.S. Patent Office a patent for a thing from egad ancient times called, I think this actually was the 1940s, called the cathode ray tube amusement device, which was never made, but it was patented, and it describes something that could loosely be described as a video game. Yeah! Think about that level of madness. Even figuring out what could be called the first video game winds up being so much more than just, oh yeah, it was this one thing, it was Pong. No, not even Pong. Although it is funny that that I do actually find it hilarious that the first known built video game was kind of Pong. It plays very differently from Pong, but because it calculated the arc of the ball and it actually went over the net. You didn't just move up and down. It was more about getting the arc right. But, yeah, so the first video game was still tennis. It was funny, because for a minute we thought it was two spaceships shooting at each other with computer space. But no. It was tennis for two, which was not Pong, but still Pong. Cripes. So now you know that you don't know. And knowing that you don't know is the first step to knowing. I don't know. That sounded good in my head for a minute. But now you see what I mean. You gotta keep an open mind, and you gotta know, oh my God, the misconceptions about video games are everywhere. It is so easy to be just so wrong. And then you get into the gray zone stuff. Because this was funny. I was watching Maximilian's stream when he was playing the Crash Insane trilogy, and he was talking about the fact that Crash Bandicoot came out before Mario 64, and Simmons was like, no, it didn't. He's like, well, then all these retrospectives are wrong. Well, did it come out first or not? Yes and no. That actually exists in a funky gray zone. You see, Crash Bandicoot was obviously made with no inspiration from Mario 64. There were no 3D platformers when they began development of it. But Mario 64 came out in Japan before Crash Bandicoot. But in America, and this is the most amazing thing, Mario 64 came out like 2 or 3 weeks after Crash Bandicoot. And I remember this because there's a commercial, and you can find it on YouTube, of Crash Bandicoot, guy in a Crash Bandicoot suit, with the megaphone outside Nintendo of America headquarters, because that was their thing, was Crash Bandicoot making fun of Nintendo, and he was making fun of them because Mario wasn't 3D. They only ran this ad for 2 weeks, because then Mario 64 came out, and we all knew it was coming. Like, the entire time, I remember as a kid, like 10 or something, I looked at that ad and I'm like, you know Mario 64 is coming. What are you doing, Sony, you idiots? But they did it! And that ad only aired for like those 2 weeks, and then they were like, oh, we gotta stop airing this ad because we're gonna look really, really dumb. You already look dumb. We all knew about Mario 64. You should have stuck with all your others standing outside Nintendo yelling into a megaphone ads. You shouldn't have done that one. How dumb can you be? Anyway, there you go. I believe that that wraps up GameBabble Live for this week. Thank you so much for joining me. Sorry it was a bit of a sloppy start. Just, it was weird. It has been a weird day. I woke up on the, feather-filled side of the bed. My brain was just not going. But we got there. I'm sorry, this is early in the morning for me. I don't wake up until noon. Don't know. Even then, I'm still only like half awake at noon. I wake up more like 12:30. So thank you so much for joining me for yet another fun-filled episode of GameBabble Live. Hope to see you again next week. Also, don't forget that Mo Game Con is coming up. That's August 12th and 13th. It looks like it's going to be a small little video game convention. They're going to have a Nintendo PlayStation there. There's going to be the guy behind the Leisure Suit Larry series. There's going to be that guy, Tim McVeigh, from Man vs. Snake, not the terrorist. So, yeah, might be fun. If you haven't seen Man vs. Snake, I believe that's on Netflix, and that is a fun documentary. So, yeah, that concludes our GameBabble Live for the day. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to see you again next week. See you later, and coming up next, we've got Wherever I Go by One Republic here on 89.5 FM KCFV The Wave. Diverse music for your diverse mind.